Catholic Answers Live. My name is Christopher Check. I am president at Catholic Answers. I'm sitting in for the great Cy Kellett, who has been vacationing and celebrating 30 years of marriage with his beautiful wife, Missy. And I gather is he back, Darren, tomorrow? Is he Wednesday? He's back Wednesday. Am I hosting tomorrow? Thomas is. Okay. Relief, my friends. Tomorrow, Thomas is hosting, but for the next 2 hours, grit your teeth. It's good for your penance. 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884, to talk to my dear friend and colleague, the great Joe Heschmeyer, apologist at Catholic Answers. Joe, how are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. And I'll tell you why in a second. 888-318-7884. The topic today is Ask Me Anything. By the way, here's the reason I'm doing great, Joe, but that's not the reason I was going to tell you, but I am doing great because of this. Before you get to talk to Joe Heschmeyer today, my friends, 888-318-7884, you're first going to get to talk to the great Siobhan Cruz Kelly, my assistant, who is doing the call screening today. So, wow, bonus. 888-318-7884. But Joe,
if I can say a word, Siobhan is one of a small handful of people inside the office where when you look at how chaotic the individual personalities in Catholic Answers are, and you think, how in the world does that ship stay afloat? Secret glue is what I would say, and Siobhan is part of the secret glue.
It is the stabilizing influence here. Is that centrifugal, centripetal?
Centripetal, maybe?
Centripetal?
I get confused by this. Apparently they're quasi-forces. I don't understand.
Yeah, 888-318-7884. So, Joe, this is why I'm in a good mood. I typically always am. I'm mostly sanguine. And I've been redeemed, too, and baptized. 888-318-7884. Catholic Answers is very close. That is within $20,000 of making its revenue goal for the fiscal year. So this has been our biggest budget yet. I think it's $10.171 million, something like that. And we are within $20,000 of making that goal.
It's probably worth pointing out for people who couldn't figure it out just from context, but the fiscal year ends today.
It does.
Is that right?
Yes, today is the last day.
So we're not like, 3 months out, we've already hit our revenue goals, but it is in the plan of God coming down to the wire, and it looks like we're going to make it.
And in the plan of all our listeners, my friends, if you want to get us across the finish line, givecatholic.com. Somebody wants to do 20,000 right now and just wrap that up, but any amount will help. Givecatholic.com. Here's the other thing, Joe. Tomorrow is the feast of one of our patrons here, Junipero Serra.
Yes.
Because we are a San Diego-based apostolate. The first of the California missions is the San Diego mission. So it's a big day for us here at Catholic Answers. We start our new fiscal year on the feast of the founder of California and the feast of the founder of San Diego, St. Junipero Serra, one of our patrons here, who wanted nothing more than to bring the truth to people who hadn't heard it yet. And actually, the truth sacramentally. He wanted to baptize the heathens. That's why, is it okay to say heathen these days?
Non-Catholics, non-Christians.
Well, heathen,
practicing indigenous forms of religion.
I think heathen means someone who's not not baptized, right?
True.
Yeah.
I think that is correct.
888-318-7884.
To the heath, is that right?
Yes.
A lot of these terms come from basically like terms for rural people. Like pagan comes from paganus, like a redneck.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a rough translation. Because Christianity originally spread in the cities. So those out in the heath, like those out in the crop land, and those who were in the countryside, the Pagani, hadn't heard the gospel yet.
Yep, and hadn't had, and he told his parents, I'm going forward, I'm not looking back. He knew he would never see his parents again. And he brought the gospel to California. Every now and then someone says to me, I wish that Catholic Answers would have their conference in a state other than California, because in good conscience, I can't go to California. And I always say back, I'm really glad Junipero Serra never said that. 888-318-7884. Okay, Joe, to you. Now, you are the host, the creator, the voice, I'm not sure exactly what the word is, all those things behind the great podcast, Shameless Popery.
Well, thank you.
Well, I mean, what's the word?
I don't know if there's a question there.
I don't know what I don't want to say personality because I don't like it when we talk about Catholic personalities. That makes you sound like a celebrity, which we don't want.
In a way, it is etymologically faithful to the root of person.
Oh, person, sure, right, very good. Yeah, so you are the person behind Shameless Popery.
But yeah, I mean, originally, persona had more of a sense of personality than it did of person in the modern sense. But in either case.
And the great Michael Kupris, or Kupris, it's still not sure. We still don't know.
Kupris,
yeah. Who does all the editing and what do you call it?
Yeah.
Video editing and
it's
social
a remarkable
design.
Step up in terms of just professionality and professionalism, I suppose.
He's amazing. He's amazing.
He really is amazing. He gives me tips on how to structure things too. So he goes well above and beyond just taking the raw audio and video. He'll tell me, like, I'll bounce ideas off of him and say, I mean, literally, I sent him 17, 18 different theme ideas and said, what do you think of these? And he gave me feedback on them. So he's a very instrumental force in the growth of the channel, and it has been growing quite quickly. So I'm thankful to both him and ultimately to God.
I sat this morning in a meeting with the marketing department here at Catholic Answers, and the growth of Shameless Popery is stunning and exciting. And I mentioned Michael because I want him to get credit for the work that he's doing, but also to make the point that at Catholic Answers, we do have very talented and knowledgeable apologists like Joe, who are fun to hang around. So come to our conference, but without the work of the truly talented technicians and artists behind them, their work would not reach the audiences, the scope and size of the audiences that it does. Same here with the work that Luke Bender does with the YouTube channel, for example, for Catholic Answers Live. 888-318-7884. So thank you, Michael, and my friends. When you support Catholic Answers at givecatholic.com, you're helping us reach a lot of people. So, Joe, to Shameless Popery. You recently had an episode in which you very charitably, I should say, but thoroughly, and not that thoroughness and charity are opposed, explained what was awry in a United States senator from Texas, Ted Cruz, saying that his foreign policy was informed by things that he had learned in Sunday school as a very young child, which was kind of an alarming thing to hear. I mean, maybe not, but also possibly yes. What were you unpacking there, Joe?
Yeah, so he was arguing that somewhere in the Bible it says whoever blesses Israel will be blessed and whoever curses Israel will be cursed. And it seems that he is taking this from Genesis 12, 1-3, and interpreting it in the way many modern dispensationalist Protestants do. And many Protestants are totally unaware that Christians have not historically interpreted the passage to mean that this is about, militarily aiding the nation state of Israel or about a group of Israelis at all. But that is how people have interpreted it in the U.S. in many places.
Large numbers of people. Right,
yeah,
Joe?
Yeah, huge. I mean, the Left Behind series comes from this theological worldview, and it's based on taking everything in this very literalistic way, where you miss the deeper meaning of words almost as a principle. And I mean, that might sound completely unfair and pejorative, but let me explain what I mean by that. This modern dispensationalist movement is closely tied to fundamentalism, which was a push against the modernist Protestants who wanted to treat everything as a metaphor, including things like the resurrection. And so in response to that, they basically took the position that nothing is a metaphor. And they don't go quite that far. They're happy to still say Jesus' words about the Eucharist must be a metaphor. But the stuff like where Jesus talks about the temple, they think, oh, that means literally a temple, even though John 2 says it's about his body. And so they'll insist, like, no, there's going to literally be a temple rebuilt in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount where there's currently a mosque. So that mosque needs to be destroyed. And so we need to support Israel so we can, trigger the apocalypse. And there's a lot of things that go wrong with that worldview more broadly. But I'm focusing just specifically on this question of Genesis 12, because Genesis 12 doesn't say whoever blesses the nation state of Israel, leaving aside what it means to bless them. It says whoever blesses Abraham, or Abram at that time, and then by extension, his descendants. So the question becomes, God's covenantal blessings, to whom do they flow? If they flow along bloodline, that would go to the firstborn. But that would mean Ishmael rather than Isaac. Or if you want to go to the next generation, it would mean Esau rather than Jacob. But as St. Paul points out in Romans 9, that can't be the way that you interpret Genesis 12. What's striking about Ted Cruz and more broadly the Southern Baptist Convention interprets Genesis 12 this way, and many Protestants in kind of that ilk, is that it is explicitly rejected as a way of reading God's covenant promises in the New Testament by St. Paul, by John the Baptist, and by Jesus. Jesus says that you're a son of Abraham if you do what he did. St. Paul likewise says the same thing in Romans and in Galatians, and I believe in Ephesians as well. And he explicitly points to Genesis 12, 1-3, as proof that the faithful Gentiles are members of the covenant, which is the inverse of the way Ted Cruz is taking it. So it is it's a fascinating bit of theological interpretation that has real consequences, not only for foreign policy, where a huge number of Americans believe we have to give military aid to Israel because something Genesis. But also, if you look to places like Jeremiah 31, God promises to make his new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. And Hebrews 8 applies this to the new covenant, and Jesus says that he's inaugurating a new covenant at the Last Supper. And so if you take Israel to not mean the church, if Israel means ethnic Jews, or only those ethnic Jews who deny that Jesus is the Messiah, or whoever happens to be a citizen of this country, if you interpret it in any of those ways, then Gentiles are not part of the new covenant. Gentiles are not part of the church, or the church isn't part of the new covenant. And all of that is theologically a total disaster. And so we have to interpret the covenant promises of God as both the Old and the New Testament tell us to, which is that participation in the covenant is always contingent upon faith. So if you reject God, you are rejecting the covenant. And if you accept God, you're brought into the covenant.
Joe, shamelessjoe.com, right? That's your website?
The Shameless Joe's, if you want to support it in terms of Patreon.
Which is exactly what we want people to do.
Okay, there we go. Yes, if you want to become a member, you get ad-free episodes and Q&A. I actually do 2 Q&A times a week for those at the $10 a month level. So yeah, it's a great way of supporting the show, and it's helping to offset the cost.
All right,
helping
Joe.
us make our budget.
All the lines are full, and we're going to take a short break. Right back after this.
Catholic Answers Live.
Are you looking to study Catholic theology in a formal way with the guidance of faithful scholars? Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by the Augustine Institute, offering master's degrees in theology, pastoral theology, and Catholic education with flexible study options on campus, online, or both. The Augustine Institute equips students to serve Christ and His Church in schools, parishes, dioceses, apostolates, and the home. Learn more today at augustine.edu.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features texts of daily Mass, prayers, articles, meditations, art commentaries, and more, in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church, on the web at magnificat.com.
EWTN, helping people grow in their love and understanding of God.
I just want to share that 5 years ago, my lovely warrior princess and saint of a wife and I decided to adopt a little girl through foster care. She is the perfect roundout of our family of 3 boys and her. Yes, there are challenges. Very grateful today for all the blessings that he has shown our family.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Catholic Answers Live. Chris Check sitting in for Cy Kellett. My guest, the great Joe Heschmeyer. And Joe, I would like to talk to you some more about the great work of your podcast, but we have 6 people. All the lines are full. So we're going to answer questions instead.
Okay, let's do it.
Taylor in Denver, Colorado, watching on the Catholic Answers YouTube channel. Welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Joe. Thanks for taking my question.
Sure.
I have a two-parter. So I have a
please.
toddler daughter, and I've been trying to bring her to Mass regularly. I brought snacks and books to help, and she can sometimes last until about the homily, which is great. But then the wiggles inevitably.
I have the same problem, Taylor.
Yeah. So, Chris, your children are older, though.
No, I can last until about the homily. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I'm sorry.
I see.
Yeah. Joe didn't.
How old is your
Taylor,
daughter?
Joe didn't think it was funny either. All right.
I thought it was mildly funny. Not like laugh out loud funny, but I got a smirk.
Go ahead, Taylor.
Oh, sorry. So I was just wondering what your advice for helping little ones stay engaged during Masses, and also for us parents, how do we avoid getting overwhelmed or discouraged when it starts to feel like there's chaos in the pew?
First of all, I think you might be sent by God to punish me for being too strict with my kids yesterday, because I realized about 2/3 of the way through Mass I had too high of expectations for them. So, divine retribution, I receive you. Second, it is something to be aware of. So I'd say these things. Number one, lower your expectations. And number two, like, your ultimate goal is not to have a good Mass this Sunday or today or whatever. Your ultimate goal is to create an environment in which your kids love going to Mass and take it seriously. And so if you lean heavily on being really strict, you can win the battle and lose the war, because you can make them dread going to Mass because they get in a lot of trouble. So I think if you start with those premises and then focus on how do we help create good behavior during Mass. The third thing I would say is, if you've ever watched any other family with their toddler, you know that they freak out about it a lot more than anybody else does. And so I find that hard to believe when my kids are expressing themselves. But I have to, in the back of my mind, think this is worse for me than it probably is for most people around us, so I can have a little more grace in this moment, because I'm often worried about, like, am I distracting somebody else from prayer? And that sometimes happens. There are times you have to go to the back, etc. But I think it's okay to allow more noise than you might naturally feel comfortable with, because you trying to correct them is probably more disruptive. And you taking them to the back of the church every time they act like toddlers is only hurting you more than it's helping anybody else, because you need to be able to receive at Mass as well. And it's great if other people can have a really beautiful, peaceful, serene experience, but it shouldn't come at your ability to ever receive what Father might have to say in the homily. Fourth, I don't actually think you should bring snacks and toys. Now, that's a controversial opinion, and some of that is kid dependent, but I find that, at least for our family, there's no measurable improvement when we have snacks and toys, and half the time those become a new thing. Now, we've got 3, so it's also a thing they can fight over, and one of them's a thrower. So there's a couple other reasons why you might not want to bring snacks and toys in those cases, but I would at least be very selective. If it's something like a soft stuffed animal where they're going to hold on to it, that might be fine. But if it's a hard plastic toy, that's probably more annoying than them just being little kids. Fifth, I think I'm on fifth. If you get to church early or stay after or have some time where the liturgy isn't directly going on, and let them explore the space. And a lot of times kids, like especially 1 and 2, they want to listen to the acoustics. They want to vocalize and hear the echo, because it's part of the way they experience the space. Having time in church where there isn't the Mass going on and they can just explore it is really good. And then if there's statues or any beautiful art in the church, when you get up, maybe instead of going completely out of the church, you can go over to the statue and then stand there. They can look at the statue and you're half distracted but half able to listen, etc. And then, finally, I would just say, in terms of kind of concretely setting low but realistic expectations, you can point out, especially once they hit maybe about 3, You can take sort of a Montessori approach of explaining the vestments, explaining the altar, explaining, what the different statues mean and what everything in the church means. And then you can quietly point those things out to them. And then they can engage at that level and can sort of grow in a little bit of an appreciation for it. And then the final thing I would say is blatantly bribe them after Mass if they have the kind of vision that they can be bribed with a far-off promise of things. So we've got my 5-year-old, I can say, if you're really good in Mass, we'll get a treat afterwards. My 3-year-old, if I tell him, if you're really good in Mass, we can get a treat afterwards, he will immediately want to know if Mass is over and he can have the treat right now. And so you know your children better than I do. So be prudent as to whether it makes sense to, try the carrot and stick. But I think the carrot is probably your friend for getting them to behave just a little bit quietly during Mass. So I don't know if any of that's helpful, Taylor, but join the crowd of every generation of parents probably throughout history.
Taylor, Jackie and I had 4 sons. The youngest is 21. Everything Joe said, I completely agree with, especially a lot of it, including the sort of the Montessori approach, even sort of whispering as things are going along, sort of a blow by blow. Jesus is coming, listen for the bells, that kind of thing. This is something that we found very effective. We sat in the front. We sat in the first couple of pews, and I'm not saying we never had to do the walk of shame, right? But actually being up front where the kids are visually engaged and not distracted way in the back. Parents with little kids sit in the back, and the kids can't see anything. Sit down front, and then I would just make a general appeal to anybody listening. I find it so inspiring. It gives me so much joy when I hear kids making noise at Mass. Obviously, somebody's screaming, then you got to take them out. But if you're bothered by kids at Mass, then, Taylor, that's the problem of the people around you, not your problem. Did you have a second question, Taylor?
No, that was all very, very helpful. And she's turning 3, so I think the Montessori approach is going to work well. And our church is very large and beautiful, and it's got lots of statues, so I will have her kind of walk around and thank you.
I forgot to mention this earlier. One last thing you can do is you can practice sitting still at home. So we have a little like a little nook by the window that looks a little bit like a pew, and I will actually, particularly if they have a really packed Mass, one of the things we'll practice after we get home is sitting relatively still on the pew for 3 minutes, and that kind of helps them a little bit, maybe. And, it's one of those things where, again, you're going to lose a lot of battles in the ultimately successful war.
If you have a school in the Denver area that's doing that catechesis of the Good Shepherd, which came out of Maria Montessori, it's that sort of poetic or pre-rational knowledge that children gain of the faith. It is a magnificent pedagogy, and I encourage you to look that up as well. That'll definitely help.
My kids go to a Catholic Montessori, and they started talking about like why the priest wears different color vestments, stuff I never even thought to point out to them. But my daughter was annoyed the day after Pentecost that we only had 1 day of Pentecost, whereas Easter had 8. And so she just became a radicalized, I want a Pentecost octave, 5-year-old.
You've got to
and it is because she watches for the different colors now, and she knows red means either martyrs or the Holy Spirit, and either way she thinks it's really cool.
All right, Taylor, thanks. Call back anytime. Manny in Sacramento, California, watching on YouTube. Welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Yeah, thank you. My question is with regard to Exodus 21, verses 7 to 11. I was wondering if I could get a little exegesis on that, because when I read through it, it sounds like it's saying that the master is putting his fiancée or his son's fiancée to work instead of just marrying her. So is that what's going on? If so, why?
This is talking about indentured servitude, right? Or temporary slavery. So it's for a period of years. And so it's not like chattel slavery for life. This was a provision dealing with female slaves or indentured servants in the case where they would choose to stay as opposed to being redeemed at the end of the period of time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's just, I guess, if, let's say the master wants to marry one of the maidservants, like she would basically continue to work off the debt prior to her marriage, is basically what's going on?
Yes. And he has certain like obligations to her as well, which he wouldn't have had otherwise. So food, clothing, marital rights, if he takes some other woman. But yeah, it is dealing with obviously a provision in a time period that is no longer applicable.
Many were up against the hard break there. I hope that was helpful. Joe, if you have any thoughts after the break, we can give those.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's the basic of what it is. It's just them navigating those waters.
Right back after this.
Each Catholic is obliged to spread and defend the faith by word and deed. Well, we're here to help. Join special guests Chris Stefanik, Dr. David Anders, Father Jeff Kirby, and all your favorite Catholic Answers apologists this September 25th through 28th in beautiful San Diego for the Catholic Answers Conference. Our theme? Go make disciples. Enjoy 4 days of faith, fun, and fellowship. Use promo code EARLY to save $50 when you register today at CatholicAnswersConference.com.
Lots of people have big questions about Catholicism. It needs a big book of answers, and now it's got one. The Big Book of Catholic Answers is filled with helpful replies to more than 250 questions about the faith. Questions about God, salvation history, the Creed, the Bible, the list goes on and on. Order your copy of the Big Book of Catholic Answers today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun, and that is exactly what our good friend Joe Heschmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, of morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron.
Catholic Answers Live, 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. Chris Check sitting in for Cy Kellett. Joe, did you want to put a bow on that question about that admittedly curious passage from Exodus, or we're good?
No, I think we're good. I mean, it is one of those things where it's not how we would handle things today. Although in terms of the very narrow question of the wife continuing to work after marriage, that actually hasn't changed.
That's right. Yeah. Let's go to Ava in Ontario, Canada, watching on the Catholic Answers Live YouTube channel. Ava, welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Hello, thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I have a question. In an Agatha Christie mystery, there was a character where her uncle put in his will that she couldn't inherit her money unless she married this specific person, but she didn't want to marry him. So after the uncle died, in order to get her inheritance, she and the man got married civilly. She got her inheritance, and then they got divorced. What are the moral implications of doing that?
There's a lot going on here.
Yes. So, okay, let's break it up into two parts. One, is it moral to marry someone for their inheritance? And the answer is yes, that can be one of the factors in getting married to someone. Marriage does not have to be based on like a romantic idea of like, oh, I just get the butterflies for them. You can be very practical in your choice of spouse. And in fact, a lot of stable marriages are ones where both parties went into it kind of wide-eyed and very practical, and it might not be as romantic, but it might be better for everyone involved. And, you look at like divorce rate in those cases, and it's often much lower. So there's nothing wrong with saying this person wants to take care of me and I can take care of them as well. And we are thus a good match. Then, you can love them in more of the Christian sense where you are willing the good for them, even if you don't get like the, goosebumps when you hear their name or something like this. But then second, can you do a sham wedding in order to get property? And I think that strikes me as both a mockery of marriage and a mockery of the wishes of the testator.
And deceit. It's deceit.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think in those cases, it's clearly not what was meant in the inheritance, and it seems like obtaining property under deceptive circumstances, as well as a violation of what marriage is about. Like, if you get married civilly without getting married in the church, and without an intention to get married in the church, this is already a huge problem. Whether or not you live as husband and wife, because you're going through a sort of sham marriage. Now, there are times and places where someone has to be civilly married apart from being married in the church. Like some states, like some governments have laws about this, whereas like in the U.S., the priest is able to act as the agent of the state as well. So he can, sign the marriage certificate. But there are places where that's not allowed. And so you're required, in some circumstances, to get civilly married apart from a religious wedding. That's not what's in view here. But getting civilly married with the exclusion of a religious wedding because you're not intending to actually live as husband and wife, that's wrong.
Is that helpful, Ava?
Okay, thank you very much.
Call back anytime. Go ahead.
Well,
Yep.
actually, Ava, if I can add one more thing. Dorothy Sayers has some very good detective stories. So if you want someone to read after Agatha Christie, I'm in the middle of reading Dorothy Sayers' The Cloud of Witnesses right now. And so far, very good. Gentleman detective. So there you go.
888-318-7884. Your questions about the Catholic faith answered, along with mystery reading recommendations. Breeson, and I've got about a half a dozen mystery writers I can recommend, Joe.
Wonderful.
Breeson, I hope I said that correctly, in upstate New York, watching on the Catholic Answers YouTube channel. Welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Hello.
Bryson, how do we say it?
Thank you.
Bryson.
Yes.
Mea culpa.
It's a weird spelling.
It was. I was going with the Latin pronunciation there.
No, it's Irish. All right. So yeah, my question was, why does so much history and civilization, if you want to call it that, seem to happen outside the bounds of the universal church? So I can imagine. So you've got these places in the world. Biggest ones that come to mind are like India and China, where you've got like 5,000 years of real civilizational development, and like generations and generations that are, for the most part, relatively untouched by Christianity in general. So it's like, I can imagine being born a 11th century Chinese peasant girl, living to 30 or something, dying, and then being confronted with a metaphysical reality that I just had no reasonable way of kind of getting a hold of, and that happening in sort of more isolated cases wouldn't be so bothersome, but the fact that it's like that would have happened for 5,000 years so probably like billions of people in these places.
Not billions. Population growth was such that there were not a ton of people for a very long time, but millions at least.
Yeah, I suppose. But still, say the population of China is like 50 million over 2,000 years. How many generations? How many people is that, right?
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I just looked, and researchers claim there have maybe been 109 billion people who've ever lived. About 7% of them are alive right now. So but you have, as we get closer to modern times, you have both more people and more exposure to Christianity. But nevertheless, I think your point is a good one. There were people for a very long time, and are still in some places, people today, who live and die with no serious exposure to the gospel. Is that a fair way of putting what you've said?
Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
So then the question becomes, well, how does God judge them? And an important thing to bear in mind is anytime you read in the gospel, you need to do this and not do that, it is taking for granted that you are reading it. Meaning it's directed at you, someone who knows about the gospel. And our impulse is, well, what about my neighbor who doesn't know about all this stuff? And in John 21, when Jesus tells St. Peter he's going to be martyred, he has a similar reaction. Well, what about John? And Jesus' response is, what is that to you? Follow me. And so
right.
we don't want to take too strong of a view of what happens to people we were not told what happens to. We are given a few glimpses, and we can form a rudimentary theory, but it is incomplete. So here's the things that we know. Number one, we know that God judges mercifully, and one of the things that he considers is how much you knew or didn't know. One of the clearest ways we get this is when he cries out on the cross, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. So that tells us that ignorance of God's will matters. And it tells us that ignorance of God's will isn't a matter of just like what books were available to you, because the people Jesus is saying this about lived in the time of Jesus. They had the ability to hear Jesus in the flesh teaching them. And still, they were ignorant. And in a way that is at least somewhat mitigates their culpability, according to Jesus. And, this is a principle Jesus lays out in Luke 12:48, to whom much is given, much will be required. Of whom more is given, more will be required. So God gives some people 5 talents, others 2, still others 1, but he knows how much he gave you, and he judges you based on how much he gave you. So it's no good trying to hide your talent or bury it, and it's no good trying to pretend you have fewer talents than you do. You need to respond to what God has given you. And similarly, your neighbor who maybe grew up in a remote civilization where they never heard the gospel, he's going to judge them accordingly as well. Now, what does that look like? We don't have a complete picture. We know a few things. Number one, St. Paul says in Romans 10, how are men to call upon him in whom they have not believed? And how are they to believe in him of whom they have not heard? And how are they to hear without a preacher? And how can men preach unless they are sent? And so that looks pretty dire. But then, and then he even says, so faith comes from what is heard, and what is heard comes by the preaching of Christ. That's verse 17. But then in the very next verse, speaking of these Gentiles, St. Paul says, but I ask, have they not heard? Indeed they have. And then he quotes the Psalms, that their voice has gone out to all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. Now, what is he talking about there? He's quoting the Psalm talking about the majesty of creation. And so Paul has a theology that he presents in Romans that the Gentiles, whether or not they've heard anyone explicitly proclaim the gospel, have already been exposed to a couple of things. Number one, the knowledge of creation from which they can conclude that there is a creator. And number two, the voice of conscience, which tells them that there is such a thing as right and wrong, and thus a moral law, and thus a moral lawgiver. And so he lays all that out in Romans 1-3, and then in Romans 10. So God can judge them based on how they've responded to the voice of God that they have received through conscience and through creation. And St. Paul puts it like this in Romans 2, verse 6, for he will render to every man according to his works. To those who by patience and well-doing seek for glory and honor and immortality, he will give eternal life. But for those who are factious and do not obey the truth, but obey wickedness, there will be wrath and fury. And then he goes on to say in verse 14, when Gentiles who have not the law do by nature what the law requires, they are a law to themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show that what the law requires is written on their hearts, while their conscience also bears witness, and their conflicting thoughts accuse or perhaps excuse them on the day when, according to my gospel, God judges the secrets of men by Christ Jesus. So we got to take a few things away from this. Number one, God has reached out to everyone, no matter how remote they are. Whether we've reached them with the gospel or not, God in some way has. Even if it's as simple as there is a God, there is right and wrong, and you have some duty towards God. The reason there are so many religions on earth is because that basic amount of information has made it through. People understand that. 2, people then respond to what they've received, and their conflicting thoughts either accuse or excuse them on Judgment Day. And so it can be an act of faith to listen to the voice of conscience, which is God speaking to you, even if that's the only part of the gospel you have. Does that make sense?
Yes. I guess the only thing or issue that I have with it, not really an issue that I have with it, it's just that I've heard that there's it's church doctrine to an extent, and I understand there's different interpretations of what no salvation outside the church actually means, but that's like a very reasonable, that's sort of the idea that I would go with, but in light of that, that seems a little, I guess I'm asking, can those two things be synthesized?
Yeah, and the Catechism actually does. And so does Vatican II. Vatican II talks about those who knowingly reject the church are cutting themselves off from salvation. But it caveats that in that important way. And then when the Catechism talks about this doctrine, it talks about reformulating it positively to say that all who are saved are brought into relationship with the church, even if they don't know it. Like St. Paul, when he's talking about the body of Christ, talks about those who claim not to be part of the body of Christ, but still are. And so we have to believe that the body of Christ doesn't just include those who are aware of it, but can also include those who may be unaware that they are, in the eyes of God, Christians or Catholics.
Okay. Okay, Bryson?
Yeah, I think that, that was very helpful. Thank you, Joe.
My friends, Bryson's question raises a deeply important point for all of us as Catholics, and it's the very thing that we're going to be taking up at the Catholic Answers Conference this September here in San Diego, 25 to 28, and that is not only our desire to spread the gospel to those who have not heard it or who have forgotten it or are ignoring it, but our duty as adult Christians, confirmed Christians, to spread the gospel. So this year's conference topic is Go Make Disciples here in San Diego, September 25 to 28. Dr. David Anders of EWTN, Steve Dawson of St. Paul Street Evangelization, my brother, Father Paul Check, Cy Kellett, of course, will be our master of ceremonies. All the Catholic Answers apologists. Chris Stefanik is our keynote speaker. For the very first time, we're going to be having breakout sessions. So we will, on Saturday afternoon, we'll break into small groups where we'll take up whichever area of evangelization particularly interests you. Maybe it's talking to unbelievers or talking to Protestants or talking to people who have been victims of the sexual revolution. In fact, we just added the great Amy Hamilton to our program, and this is her expertise. She's superb on this. So September 25 to 28 here in San Diego. It's a magnificent time, and it's a responsibility and for us to spread the gospel, and Catholic Answers wants to help you with this responsibility. So there's a promotion code, EARLY, EARLY, that saves you $50 off your conference ticket. Visit CatholicAnswersConference.com, and we'll see you here in September, CatholicAnswersConference.com.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
People often wonder about the power of prayer. Why do we pray anyway if we end up having to do so much work for ourselves? So the reality is, we find ourselves up against a wall and we pray. It's like God turns a light up on the other side of that wall, brighter and brighter and brighter, until the light shines through the tiniest cracks. God might not do it all for me, but he shows me how to make my work more efficient so that together we can accomplish all things through his grace.
Who was the first Catholic in your family? Were they evangelized by a friend, a coworker, a stranger? Did you ever think that you could be that person that God uses to save a soul? And that soul could save their family, their grandchildren, and generations to come. At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we train, equip, and mobilize Catholic disciples to do the urgent work of evangelization. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
Catholic Answers Live. Chris Check sitting in for Cy Kellett, Will Prentice, John, Eliza, Michael, Levi. Fear not, we will get you on, if not in this hour, in the next hour. Let's go to Will in Arkansas, watching on the Catholic Answers YouTube channel. Will, welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Thanks for having me.
Sure.
Okay. So my question is...
Sorry, real quick. Are you on speakerphone?
I'm on an earbud. Let me disconnect if it's causing trouble.
Yeah, we might get a little bit better sound
a
there.
little,
if you right. You there, Will? Good. Try that.
Good. Yeah. Where's this? Will, there's a way.
Okay. So my question is: does Catholicism teach that a law is the same as the biblical God? And if so, in what ways?
Good question, Will.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very good question. And that was, it's been all over the internet right now. We have to clarify a couple things. This is what's called the theory of referent, or theory of reference. So imagine three people looking at the sky, and one says it's a bird, another says it's a plane, another says it's Superman. They're all pointing in the same direction. They, if asked to give descriptions, would have wildly different descriptions. Are they still referring to the same thing?
That's for you, Will, to
Yeah.
answer. Yeah, good.
So,
yeah.
I guess the second question. When an atheist says, the God of Abraham does not exist, and he's wicked, and I'm glad he doesn't exist. And we say, yes, the God of Abraham does exist, and he's good and not wicked. Are we disagreeing?
That is a very good point. I guess you are disagreeing, but not on whether
Yeah, we're both referring to the same object, the same referent, which is the God of Abraham. Even though we have wildly different descriptions, one says he's good, one says he's bad, one says he exists, one says he doesn't. The atheist literally denies an essential property of God, multiple essential properties of God, that he's all loving, that he necessarily exists, and so on. And even so, we have to say that they are negating the same referent that we're affirming, or else atheists and Christians agree. Because if by God doesn't exist, they mean something other than the God of Abraham, then we agree. No other God exists. And so if Christians and atheists disagree, then we have to establish that even people who get the nature of God wrong are referring to God even when they are wrong. So when Muslims say the God of Abraham exists and then they claim false things about him, we would say they're talking about the same God. They're just making false claims about him. They're better than the atheist because they acknowledge that he exists, but they get elements of his nature and his character and all of that wrong. And so if an atheist can be talking about the God of Abraham when he says God of Abraham, then so can a Muslim. Even if people say things that are false about God. Then the last one I would just say, if somebody says, I think God wants me to, cheat on my wife. Well, we would say that's not the voice of God talking, but you're still talking about God, even if you're ascribing to God properties that are you or Satan. Even in those extreme cases, we're still talking about the same referent, the same God. So there are times where it gets murky as to other groups, what they even mean by God, by creator. But in the case of Muslims, it's actually relatively straightforward, in my view, that the very low bar of, are we at least talking about God, they clear. What I want to be really clear about, though, because I think where a lot of people get nervous, and I understand why, in saying that, we're not saying Muslim theology is as good as Christian theology, or Muslim worship is as good as Christian worship, or anything like that. Or it's fine whether you want to be a Muslim or a Christian. when I say atheists and Christians are both talking about the same God, that doesn't mean they're both right. It just means they're having the same conversation. Whereas if I say God exists and somebody else says Thor doesn't, we don't even disagree. We're just having two different conversations.
Okay, Will? Will, did we lose you? Joe, good answer. Let's go to Prentice from Gonzales, Louisiana, watching on the Catholic Answers YouTube channel. Welcome, Prentice.
Good afternoon, guys. How y'all doing?
We're doing great. How can we help?
Good. I found myself in kind of like this little natural conversation where it turned into sharing beliefs and everything. And
good.
I'm a Catholic, and he was an atheist. And whenever we just started kind of talking, I just started talking about the gospel. He kind of brought up towards the end where we were kind of done with the conversation. We just kind of threw it out there to I didn't even have a chance to respond, but I didn't think about it. And he was bringing up dinosaurs and evolution and how it just kind of put my brain in a scramble on how evolution could coincide with the creation story in Genesis. So just kind of helped me navigate that and clear up some confusion maybe.
Yeah, the first thing I want to say is there is not one single Catholic way of reading the early chapters of Genesis. So I don't want somebody to hear this and say you have to read Genesis the same way, Joe Heschmeyer, the people at Catholic Answers, or anything like that, read the early chapters of Genesis. There is a wide range of readings. We're given a few hints, though, about how to read it. In the Catechism, we're given a few different answers. So in paragraph 289, it says, among all the scriptural texts about creation, the first 3 chapters of Genesis occupy a unique place. From a literary standpoint, these texts may have had diverse sources. The inspired authors have placed them at the beginning of Scripture to express in their solemn language the truths of creation, its origin and its end, meaning purpose, goal, in God, its order and goodness, the vocation of man, and finally the drama of sin and the hope of salvation. Read in the light of Christ, within the unity of sacred Scripture and in the living tradition of the Church, these texts remain the principal source for catechesis on the mysteries of the beginning, creation, fall, and promise of salvation. So notice the first thing. The early chapters of Genesis are there to tell a story about all creation coming from God, that God is not taking a pre-existing universe and rearranging it, as different forms of paganism claimed. He's creating everything from nothing, and everything is ordered towards him. He wants to renew creation with the new heavens and the new earth. The order and goodness of creation, the vocation of man, all of that is being taught in Genesis. It is not intending to teach biology. So if you took the parable of the sower and the seed and you tried to use it as just farming instructions, then you've missed the point of the thing being taught. Now, maybe the sower and the seed is a great way to learn how to farm. Maybe it's not. That's not the point of the passage at all. Likewise, in the early chapters of Genesis, it's not principally trying to express a scientifically nuanced explanation of how different things came into being. It's expressing the ultimate question of the why anything exists rather than nothing. And you see this in several places. So, for instance, in Genesis 3, you have the serpent speaking to Adam and Eve. And at no point are we told that this is anything other than a talking snake. There is not one word in Genesis itself announcing that this is really Satan. And yet you're expected to know this is not literally a snake. And Revelation 12 explicitly identifies this as the devil. That's not in Genesis. But so you see the New Testament reads the early chapters of Genesis not as just literal, but in a deeper, more figurative way. Much closer to how you would read, for instance, the book of Revelation, where it's not all people are literally getting the mark of the beast. This is a figure of speech. A lot of this is symbols and imagery. So I know we're hitting the break here, but paragraph 390 of the Catechism explicitly says Genesis 3 uses figurative language to describe a real historical event. So there's a lot more that could be said, but hopefully those tools give you something to work with as you kind of navigate those waters.
Prentice, give your mailing address to Siobhan, and we're going to send you a copy of Jimmy Akin's A Daily Defense, which is going to help you a lot in all the conversations that you have with your friends. And thank you for your work evangelizing John, Eliza, Michael, Levi, stay on the line. We will get to you. Catholic Answers Live. Chris Check sitting in for Cy Kellett. Right back after this. Catholic Answers Live. Chris Check sitting in for Cy Kellett, who will be back on Wednesday. Tomorrow, your special guest is Thomas, the TikTok Engine. My guest today, Joe Heschmeyer. Ask Me Anything. Joe, you and Cy Kellett and I, about a year from now, a little bit less, are going to cruise the Catholic Rhineland on a specially chartered boat. That is, the whole of the boat is going to be owned for 12 days or whatever it is. I don't know if owned is technically the right word, but we will be the only ones on there, so we can pretend it's ours. We've chartered it. We did this with the Danube back in 2020. The whole boat was Catholic Answers. My friends, I encourage you to come along. CatholicCruise.com. We start in Amsterdam. We end in Basel. We have 12 ports of call, including Cologne, and where there's a magnificent cathedral, actually several magnificent cathedrals. Aachen, we're going to go to, the home of Charlemagne. There's so much Catholic history in the Rhine Valley. Hildegard of Bingen, we're going to see her, the great doctress of the church. We're going to see the Strasbourg Cathedral. As I say, this region is rich with Catholic history, beautiful sites. See it in the company of other Catholics who love the work of Catholic Answers and who love Jesus Christ. Our chaplain is the great Father Sebastian Walsh of St. Michael's Abbey, the Norbertines just up the street, whom you know is a regular guest here on Catholic Answers Live. I think we've already sold about 50 spaces already, and this boat is not that big. So CatholicCruise.com. Everything is included in your price. All your shore excursions, your meals, your drinks, all the lectures, onshore masses. Of course, you don't have to pay to go to Mass, I know, but we've arranged for wonderful onshore masses. So CatholicCruise.com. Don't delay signing up. Joe, I know you're looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's going to be a beautiful experience. And Father Sebastian Walsh is incredible. He just blessed the home of my brother and sister-in-law over the weekend, and they were talking about what a joy it was to be with him just for a little bit of time there. So being able to be with him for an extended period of time is well worth the travel.
And imagine 12 days with Joe Heschmeyer and Cy Kellett.
And you can go to confession when you need to.
Yeah. Not to Joe Heschmeyer.
No, not to Joe Heschmeyer, thankfully.
John in Oklahoma, listening on Sirius 130 EWTN satellite radio. Welcome to Catholic Answers Live. You there, John? There you go.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Loud and clear. What's your question, brother?
Okay. So I got a dilemma here.
Sure.
Just found out that, okay, now the person who, and I'm still new at this, so the person that does the singing and stuff, that's the cantor, correct?
The cantor, yep.
Correct.
Okay. Just found out that the cantor in our parish is openly homosexual.
Mm.
Does that take away from the Mass, the authority of the Mass? Is there something, should I not worry about it since apparently the priest is okay with it? I don't know, because I'm kind of bothered by it. It's like,
Sure.
Okay, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Sure. We can
So
help.
Is this invalidating the Mass?
We can help.
It doesn't invalidate the Mass. It can cause some scandal because it can make it look like this is not a big moral issue. This is one of those areas where the cantor isn't in the same kind of liturgical position as, say, the priest, but is nevertheless doing something in an official liturgical capacity. It's different than just somebody in the pews. If the person next to you in the pews who happens to be singing is living a sinful lifestyle, irrelevant. That doesn't, that we want them there. They shouldn't go for communion, but we want them to be present at the Mass, and that's good and beautiful. But someone who's in a cantoring position or in the choir, it gets into more of an official kind of position. And so then you are representing the church more. And as a result, someone living in a way radically contrary to the church, there is more of a scandal with it. And so I would absolutely say something about it to the pastor. I mean, I strongly suspect the pastor already knows about this, but trying to understand at a deeper level, like why they're okay with this can be very important. In terms of the validity of the Mass, that doesn't impact the validity at all. It can be distracting. It can be a little bit scandalous, but you still have a valid mass there. But I do think it is a situation worth confronting. And because the other thing that comes up, you will have people, particularly at like high holidays, where you might have different instruments and everything at mass that aren't normally there, like violinists and the like. You will sometimes have people who aren't practicing Christians at all. Or at least they're not Catholic, and they are often living lifestyles that aren't in keeping with the gospel. And so it does happen from time to time, but a cantor, because they are sort of the voice of the congregation in the singing, I think it is more of a scandal there and might be worth addressing.
How's that, John? Is that helpful?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can always leave it up to Joe to explain stuff to where I can understand it.
I'm grateful.
That's an important skill for an apologist. Good. Thanks, John. Call back anytime. Eliza in New Jersey, watching on the Catholic Answers YouTube channel. Welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Hi. I just want to say thank you for the show and everyone in the comments and the mods. Y'all are all so great.
Glory.
Yes. Big Stack is doing some great work. I know moderating. I never really get a chance to call out the moderators, but I don't even think Big Stack is Catholic yet, but does a great job moderating several Catholic shows. And, God's going to do what he's going to do.
He is irresistible.
For sure. So
how can we help, Eliza?
That kind of came up. Oh, excuse me.
Yep.
At church the other day, we were talking about confession, and I recognized that in Scripture, the examples of women, it's kind of like Jesus calling out women and not them confessing. So I'm wondering about the history of the church when women started receiving the sacrament of confession.
Well, are you including the woman at the well there?
Yes.
Okay, it seemed to me like he confronts her a little bit, but he seems fairly gentle in terms of, like he lets her know he knows. And then she is able to kind of open up to him at a deeper level. So, yeah, the very early history of confession, it was originally done publicly. But as far as we can tell, it's always been both men and women. Even if the particular examples we might have in the New Testament, there aren't a ton of examples given of anybody. But the particular examples we have are of men. Nevertheless, both men and women confessed their sins. And seemingly both men and women were going to John the Baptist. Again, this is one of those things where we hear more about the men. There's a line in the Gospel of Matthew when he's describing the feeding of the 5,000, and he says there were 5,000 there, not counting women and children. And so he's nodding to the fact that most of the way ancient writings worked focused on the man, and particularly on adult men, but that doesn't exclude the real lived spiritual experiences of women and children who just aren't given the same sort of narrative focus. And so we have every reason to believe men, women, and children were all listening to Jesus. Men, women, and children were responding to the gospel, including confessing their sins, and were being saved and being brought into this. And we can even point to several women who seem to have had this experience, who have become transformed and become disciples of Jesus. We just aren't given the same level of detail kind of about what their conversion experience looked like.
Is that helpful?
Okay, great.
Eliza, good.
Helpful. I love confession. It's like my favorite sacrament. So
wonderful. That's such a good thing for people to hear too.
Yes. Yeah.
Tertullian in On Repentance, one of our earliest sources that talks about the practice of confession, he gives some examples of women. I don't remember if he gives any examples of women as penitents, but he at least gives some feminine examples when he's talking about it more broadly. So it seems to point to the fact that men and women were confessing from the beginning.
Eliza, call back anytime. Michael in Los Angeles, California, watching on Catholic.com. Welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Hi, how are you guys?
We're well.
Good, how are you?
Good. I was wondering, I'm a former Protestant Catholic revert. I was wondering if you might do more Protestant or Catholic Orthodox apologetics in the future, as like I've talked to a lot of Orthodox, and a lot of the issues they bring up accuse Catholics of falling into serious, like grave error, such as like absolute divine simplicity leading to pantheism, or very complicated, like complex bedrock theology issues like that, in that like our faith is essentially invalid completely if we believe the things we believe.
Yeah. So this is a very good question. I've thought about doing an episode basically like why I'm not Eastern Orthodox. I haven't done much so far for a few reasons. One, there's just fewer kind of challenges from the Orthodox side. And I mean, certainly there are way more Protestants than there are Orthodox in the part of the country that I live in, and in fact, in the country that I live in. But two, the issues are also often very kind of niche and in the weeds. Like people who believe absolute divine simplicity leads to pantheism. Number one, that's a vanishingly small number of people. And I don't think even most ordinary Orthodox actually think Catholics and Protestants and historic theists are all pantheists. I think this is a grave misunderstanding of what absolute divine simplicity entails, because you would have to say most theists in history have not really been theists, they've been pantheists. And that's such an obviously sort of absurd conclusion that the idea that you need like essence and energies distinction before you can have theism seems obviously wrong. And like the East would have to discard many of its own saints from the first 1,000 years as actually pantheists. So there's, all of those kind of big issues. And in fact, one of the things I'm planning on saying in the half-written episode I have in my head of why I'm not Eastern Orthodox is I think the Catholic side can much more easily incorporate Eastern saints from early Christianity into Catholic theology without it seeming like a stretch, whereas many times Orthodoxy looks like just Eastern Orthodoxy, as if the Western saints for the first 1,000 years don't count. And if you don't have them as part of your patrimony, you're not really breathing with both lungs. Whereas I think the Catholic Church breathes with both lungs. And you see from the very earliest days, you get people like St. Irenaeus, who grows up in the East in Smyrna and becomes bishop in the West. And he talks about the importance of agreeing with the Church of Rome in the 100s. If your vision of the church doesn't do justice to that, it's not just a distortion of the last 1,000 years, it's a distortion of the last 2,000 years.
Michael, do you have the book that Catholic Answers published a little more than a year ago by Michael Lofton called Answering Orthodoxy?
I do not. No.
All right. Well, why don't you stay on the line and give your address to Siobhan, and we will send you a copy of it. I think Michael did a superb job with this book. But before Michael, there was Locutus, James Locutus, for many years was very good on this, but it really required a lot of updating and because as Joe was saying, new sort of niche or obscure arguments, and Michael picks up many that were completely unknown to me. I highly recommend this book to anyone who finds himself in conversations with Orthodoxy or just simply wants to understand that, because I know, Joe, and you move in this world much more than I do, the ortho bros, if you will, rather.
I'm genuinely astonished you even know that term.
Well, I'm so hip, Joe, and down with the times. But anyway, right? They're called the ortho bros, aren't they?
Yes.
A thing?
There are a lot of
online,
particularly Protestant converts to Orthodoxy, who spend a lot of time online, and this is a problem that the Orthodox have acknowledged. People who spend a lot of time watching other Orthodox bros online and maybe not a lot of time actually getting involved at their local parish or learning the patrimony of a church they've been adopted into. And they're often kind of vociferously anti-Catholic and in a way that can look more like a Protestant who discovered they didn't have a liturgical tradition,
right,
but were too opposed to Catholicism to just go all the way, so they became Orthodox.
Yeah.
And, I don't want to be uncharitable to them, but there is a grave lack of charity and depth of formation and spiritual growth that you find in some of those quarters that I don't think is faithful to historic Orthodoxy. And so I think it's kind of a different phenomenon, distinguishing ortho bros from the historic Orthodox.
Nonetheless, they are kind of the growing cultural presence, I guess you could say.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Answering Orthodoxy by Catholic Answers Press, and Michael will be happy to send you a copy of that. My friends, we're going to take a quick break. Before I do, I want to invite all of you to join us September 25 to 28 here in San Diego for the Catholic Answers Conference. Go make disciples. We are going to learn, all of us, how to be better at evangelizing, because when we die, God is going to ask us, what did you do to tell the world about my son? And you don't want to get caught off. You don't want to be able to say, I didn't do anything. And then our Lord will say, well, he told you to. It's going to go something like that. So join us. Go make disciples September 25 to 28 here in San Diego. Chris Stefanik, David Anders, Amy Hamilton, Steve Dawson, Paul Check, Father Paul Check, and all your favorite Catholic Answers apologists. Save $50 off your conference registration by using the promo code EARLY. And that just means this is like the early bird rate, so it's not going to be forever. I don't know when it ends, but through the end of July, 1 month. Wow. Save $50, CatholicAnswersConference.com. Right back after this.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
This is Jim Pinto, Director of EWTN Media Missionaries. EWTN Media Missionaries prayerfully take EWTN to parishes and the community through the print and electronic media we provide. You can help EWTN share the good news by becoming a media missionary. Visit EWTNmissionaries.com today and join us in sharing the eternal word with the world.
Catholic Answers Live, 888-318-7884. Joe Heschmeyer, my guest. Chris Check sitting in for Cy Kellett, who will be back on Wednesday. Levi in Louisiana, watching on the Catholic Answers YouTube channel. Welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Hi, thanks.
Sure.
I have questions. See if I could get some advice or tips about a strange sequence of events that occurred to me about a week ago at a retreat. I need to discern whether or not this is a coincidence or something
supernatural,
else, something mystical.
Yeah.
And if needed, I can provide some more details, or if you have any opening advice.
Okay, so you're just wondering in general what principles to look for?
What's that?
Are you asking for general principles of what to look for and figuring out if something was miraculous or not? Or mystical?
I don't think it's necessarily miraculous. It's just a very strange sequence of events that occurred over 3 days on my trip that seemed to be related to a prayer that I asked for something to be revealed.
Sure. Good.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things where you may never know with infallible certainty that God arranged this on purpose, but he has certainly presented you with a series of events that have led you to believe something might have been miraculous, might have been the hand of God. So if the conclusion is you're being led into a deeper love of God and a greater charity, then you should accept it. And it's okay if, at the end of your life, it turns out just a random coincidence. There's nothing bad that has resulted from that. On the other hand, if you have an experience and it's encouraging you to something that is contrary to the faith, it's encouraging you to sin or to schism or to something like this, then or some new revelation that doesn't match with what God has given us publicly, those are certain signs that it is not of God, and you should reject it. But as long as what you're being given makes you believe more deeply in the love of God and of the way you've been called to grow as a saint, then I would take it seriously. If you want more certain knowledge about it, the other thing you can do is you can ask a priest to serve as a spiritual director to you, or sometimes a qualified lay person. There are times where laity are trained in the principles of spiritual mentorship, and then have them kind of walk through with you the discernment process to see what evidence do we have that this might be of God, and what evidence do we have that this might just be a coincidence or of man or God forbid, of the enemy.
What do you think, Levi?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. That's helpful. Yeah, I do believe it was something leading me towards God, something of a good nature, a good spirit.
Good.
Well, I mean, I would take that
yeah,
seriously.
The whole situation just left me really confused.
Yeah.
Because it was not what I was expecting.
Levi,
are you familiar with the rules for discernment of St. Ignatius?
Yes.
Okay, well, yeah, he gives 14 rules for discernment of spirits, and those can be a good thing to take a look at, to see kind of broadly, like, okay, does it appear that I'm listening to the right voice, or does it appear that I'm not?
Levi, if I can recommend another resource to you, our friends Dan and Stephanie Burke at the Avila Institute are very good on discernment of spirits, interior life, spiritual direction, and visiting their website, and they even have online communities. Perhaps getting involved in one of them, I think, could be helpful to you in this regard. And then the other thing that I would say is, and Joe's recommendation for those Ignatian rules. The more you sit with our Lord in front of the Blessed Sacrament quietly, the more He's going to make plain to you what it is He has in mind, and on His schedule, for sure. But it'll be revealed, and it sounds like good fruit will come from it.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Call back anytime, Levi. Mike in Massachusetts, listening on the Catholic Answers app. Mike, thanks for downloading on the Catholic Answers app, and I have great news. There is a whole new Catholic Answers app that's coming very soon, and it's going to make this app that you're currently using look like it was from the 13th century. So stand by. Welcome, Mike.
Those old 13th century apps were terrible.
I know. They're very clumsy. Yeah.
It took forever to crochet.
Buggy. Yeah. Mike, how can we help? Mike in Massachusetts.
Yep. Can you hear me?
We can.
Now we can.
All right. Yeah, great. So I have a question. So I'll give you the question and then maybe some context. The question is, can an ecumenical council change doctrine in a way that creates a liturgical abuse? And if so, wouldn't that contradict Matthew 18 about loosening on earth is then loosened in heaven? And the context to that is I was listening to a podcast where a priest was explaining his opinion that receiving on the hand was a liturgical abuse, and that some Catholic mystics have had visions of purgatory where the bishops that approved this were in purgatory because of this. Now, I know that's all personal revelation, but it got me thinking of that question.
Okay, so there's a couple things to know there. Number one, you can't change doctrine. What you're describing is in technical parlance called the discipline, like a practice. Because something can't go from true to untrue or vice versa. You can define doctrine more clearly, but you can't just change it. When we talk about development of doctrine, we talk about the truth coming into greater clarity, not just like X is now not X. So this practice and liturgical practices more broadly typically involve discipline. A church practice, and discipline is connected to dogma, but it's not the same thing. Second, Vatican II doesn't actually say anything about receiving communion in the hand as opposed to on the tongue. This is a practice that originated after Vatican II and was originally combated by the church and then eventually was permitted. If you go back to the early church, people did receive in the hand. So it was a pious devotion that arose to receive on the tongue that then became church law, that then people started to flaunt the church law and receive in the hand again, and then eventually church law was relaxed. But this is a matter of church law, not the working of an ecumenical council. So just to be kind of clear on all of that, it is possible for a discipline to be more or less conducive to holiness. And some of that might be hard to analyze, and none of that involves infallibility. So the First Council of Nicaea, for instance, forbade kneeling on Sundays or during the Easter season. That's because in the East, kneeling is more of a sign of penitence, whereas in the West, kneeling is more of a sign of adoration. So someone could say they like or don't like that liturgical practice derived from the council, but that wouldn't be an issue of infallibility.
Mike, I'm afraid that is the hard break. Catholic Answers Live, 888. What's the number, Joe? 888-318-7884. Right back after this.
Deepen your connection to the Church's holy days and seasons while you draw on the wisdom of the Church Fathers. Feasts of Our Fathers, the new book from Mike Aquilina and Adam Lucas, is a treasury of history, prayers, insights, and lessons that will bring you closer to the earliest of Catholic traditions. Take your prayer life and your solidarity with the Church, past and present, to a new level. Order your copy of Feasts of Our Fathers today at shop.catholic.com.
We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun, and that is exactly what our good friend Joe Heschmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron.
Our Lord needs articulate defenders of the truth to spread the joy of the Catholic faith. Catholic Answers monthly giving club, Society 315, helps you fulfill the call in 1 Peter 3:15 to always be prepared to make a defense for the hope that is in you. For as little as $10 a month, you'll help Catholics grow in faith, bring lapsed Catholics home, and lead non-Catholics to the truth. Go to casociety315.com and join today.
Catholic Answers Live, 888-318-7884. Chris Check sitting in for Cy Kellett. Tony in California, watching on the Catholic Answers YouTube channel. Welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
So my question is about Eucharistic miracles and, just miracles in general. So I know the Catholic Church is famous for having all these miracles. But then I also see these miracles happen in other churches, such as the Eastern Orthodox, the Oriental Orthodox, and even some Protestant churches. I mean, the Eastern Orthodox churches have Eucharistic miracles and, even some Marian apparitions, like in Zaytun, for example. There was even a Anglican church in Arkansas that had a Eucharistic miracle a few years ago. So, it's kind of get mixed messages when I see that, because on one hand we know that the Catholic Church is the one true church, but on the other hand, we see all these churches that also experience these miracles. So if the Catholic Church is the one true church and there's generally no salvation outside of it, why do we see these types of miracles happening in these other churches as well?
We can help, Tony.
Yeah, it's a great question. The first thing I'd say is it's a much bigger problem for someone who's not Catholic, particularly a Protestant, to explain why do Catholics have Eucharistic miracles than it would be for a Catholic to explain, like, why does an Orthodox have Eucharistic miracles. The one Anglican case you talked about, as far as I know, we just have to go off the word of the Anglican priest there. So I want to set that to one side. It doesn't appear to be one that was investigated in any way. But the Eucharistic miracles in the Catholic Church, have actually been investigated and submitted to scientific scrutiny, and you have like heart tissue appearing and the like.
And Joe, sometimes the Church says, "Oh no, a miracle has not happened
right.
here."
Yeah, that's a very good point. You can have things that look like a miracle that are not. And so one of the reasons this mattered is not because I'm accusing anybody of bad faith, is you can believe something is miraculous, it turns out not to be, and if it's not investigated, it's hard for anyone just hearing it secondhand or thirdhand to know what to make of it. But we could say at a broad level, the Catholic Church believes that God is present and active in the spiritual lives of all Christians, whether they're fully incorporated in the church or not. And so he probably does do supernatural things. There's nothing contrary to Catholicism of saying any of that. Now, all spiritual gifts are oriented, as St. Paul points out in Ephesians, towards the unity of the body. So someone getting spiritual gifts, it should not be a cause for factionalization of, I've got this gift, so therefore I'm special and don't need church unity, the way the church in Corinth kind of went for a while until St. Paul started cracking some knuckles. But rather, it should be as St. Paul says, as I say in Ephesians 4, I believe, that the gifts are given for the building up of the body. And so whatever gifts God has given, natural, supernatural, miraculous, are oriented towards our unity. So we would also say, on top of that, that the Eucharist in an Eastern Orthodox Church is a valid Eucharist. And again, this should orient us towards full communion. It is scandalous that you can receive Jesus in the Eucharist in a Catholic Church, an Orthodox Church, an Oriental Orthodox Church, and that we're not all one the way we're meant to be. That the Eucharist should be a source of unity for us. And this is something that the Catholic Church has said emphatically and repeatedly. So if you're Orthodox and believe that the Catholic priests don't have valid sacraments, then the fact that we have a Eucharistic miracle pretty well debunks that. On the other hand, the fact that a Catholic person believes God is present, including sacramentally present, in an Orthodox Church, nothing about that is challenged by a Eucharistic miracle. It's only reaffirming what we already believe, which is Jesus does show up in the Divine Liturgy, whether the celebrant is in communion with the Bishop of Rome or not. So all of those miracles taken together, it seems to me, point to the validity of Orthodox and Catholic sacraments, which is what Catholics claim, not what Orthodox typically claim, and certainly not what Protestants typically claim. So I think the miraculous case points very heavily in the Catholic direction. To deny that, you would seemingly have to say not one of the purported Eucharistic miracles and Marian apparitions is real. And I don't think the people making those claims have taken any time to closely analyze even the major ones to see if that's true.
How's that, Tony?
Awesome. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Call back. Tony, you're not so far away. You should, California's a big state. I don't know where you are, but make sure you come to our conference in September.
Oh, you know what? If I can add one thing, I don't think we have this book, so I can't offer it to you. But Father George Elliott and Stacy Trasankos, who you sometimes hear on this show, co-wrote a book called Behold, It Is I, Tradition and Science on the Real Presence of Christ in the Eucharist. And they have a section in there where they take a pretty critical investigation of purported Eucharistic miracles. And some they are just thinking this probably isn't real, and some they think it is. So it's a different approach than I've seen from a lot of books on the Eucharist, and that it spends more time on the miraculous side.
888-318-7884. Let's go to Keel in Cleveland, Ohio, listening on the Catholic Answers app. Keel, if you ever find yourself without your Catholic Answers app, there's a great Catholic network, The Rock, in Cleveland, so tune them in as well. How can we help?
Thank you. Yes, I did discover The Rock, and it's right there on my radio all the time.
Oh, good. Praise God. They do great work.
They do, just like you guys.
I missed what you said just a second ago.
Oh, just about The Rock, that I am so grateful for the Cleveland radio station. I have a question. As a recovering Calvinist, about Matthew 11:27, where Jesus says, that he alone knows the Father. And, I don't have it in front of me right now, but he talks about that he
I do.
chooses.
He says, all things have been delivered to me by my Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son chooses to reveal him.
Yeah, there's that word choose, so like Calvinist background is like, see, there you go. There it is. Can you help me?
Well, I mean, we would say all of that as Catholics, that anytime someone comes to the knowledge of God, that this is first because God has been present in their life. Because you can have a kind of an experience where you feel like, aha, one day I just woke up and I had this brilliant idea to learn about God, and then I entered in a relationship with him, and I did it, and I did it, and I did it. But in reality, in what's called the priority of grace, even the desire to learn about God is coming from God. And so the thing Matthew 11 is pointing out is all of this is coming from the Father through the Son. And so everyone who's ever been saved, no matter how much it felt like their initiative, it was always God's initiative. Now, that doesn't mean, and also there's some people God doesn't want to save. That doesn't follow at all from Matthew 11:27. It just means that everyone who is saved because God reached out to them first, not because they reached out to God first. Does that part make sense? Think about it like this: an elevator.
Well, yeah.
Like it was an elevator. You can't get up, to the 27th floor on your own. You need the elevator. But let's say you jump off the elevator. That's not the elevator deciding it doesn't like you, or the elevator deciding it doesn't want to take you up to the 27th floor. So we want to reject the idea that we can choose to ascend to God merely on our own effort. That is something the church really strongly rejects. All of this has to be the result of divine initiative. And yet we also want to acknowledge that even though we can't save ourselves, we can damn ourselves. We can take the initiative to reject the elevator. We can take the initiative to jump off the elevator. But we can't take the initiative to bring ourselves up to the 27th floor by jumping really high or something like that.
What do we think, Kale?
Yeah, that makes sense. But where I stumble is the fact that it sounds like Jesus, if he's saying he chooses to reveal the Father to some, then that kind of implies that he also chooses not to reveal him to others.
Well, not in an absolute sense. Think about the parable of the talents. We do want to say that he gives more to some people, but even in the parable of the talents, one gets 5, one gets 2, one gets 1, nobody gets none. No one, like the reason St. Paul can say that even the pagan Gentiles are without excuse is because they've received tremendous gifts from God. A talent is an enormous sum of money. And so, which is why, again, quoting that line in Romans 10, he can say there's no one who hasn't heard the good news in some sense because God's voice has gone out through all the world. And
so
this means that...
I just want to make sure. So you're saying that Jesus is responding to those who have responded to God's overtures.
Well, Jesus can give more grace to one person than to another. So, for instance, the Virgin Mary is prevented from having original sin through no merit of her own, through an act called prevenient grace. You and I were not given that. Now, in God's mercy, he can give more to one person than to another. In God's justice, he judges each of us based on the gifts that he did give us, and no one is judged based on gifts they did not receive. So the person who gets 1 talent is expected to have 2. The person who gets 5 is expected to have 10. If the person who starts with 5 rolls in with 2, that's not good. Like in the parable of the talents, the guy who's criticized starts with 1 talent, and that's not the thing he's criticized for. He's criticized for not turning that 1 talent into 2 talents and burying it instead. Not for the fact that God chose, the master chose to give him 1 talent instead of 5.
He was even called wicked, wasn't he?
He was wicked and slothful because he buried the talent he was given.
Right. Okay. Well, okay.
I mean, think about it in terms of spiritual gifts. Like every individual spiritual gift, there's some people who are better at it than other people. And so some people are better at theology. Some people are more naturally prayerful. Some people are more likely to have a mystical experience, whatever it is. Some people, they get some things about the faith more easily. They are maybe immune from certain spiritual battles, whatever it is. One person might have a very different experience than another person. And God allows all that to happen. He allows one person to be free of a spiritual struggle that someone else is burdened with. But in God's justice, he doesn't judge you based on your neighbor. He judges you based on how he has presented himself to you and the gifts and talents that he's given to you.
Okay. Yes, that makes a lot more sense.
Keel, please give your mailing address to Siobhan, if you will. Our colleague Carlo Broussard has taken up the question of election. I can't remember which one it is in his 2 books about conversations with Protestants. I'm going to send you both, and call back anytime. Rich in Cincinnati. Sure. Rich in Cincinnati, Ohio, listening on the Catholic Answers app. Welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Thank you for taking my call. So this is another literary question from like the lady in the first hour. I'm reading a book that's set in like 12th or 13th century Norway, and the protagonist of the book
is it Kristin
Lavransdatter?
Well, it's the same author. This is actually,
Master of Hestia.
Ola Odinson.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Sure.
So anyway, the protagonist in the book commits a murder, and he's afraid to confess it to the priest for one of 2 reasons. Either the priest would, as his penance, force him to admit it publicly, or might even reveal it himself. And I know under modern church law, the priest could not reveal it himself. So I was wondering, curious, like, could this ever have been something to be worried about? And could even a modern day priest enforce, even though he wouldn't reveal it, could he enforce a public revelation as part of your penance?
Yeah, good.
Yeah. So I believe Gratian's decretals in the 12th century are where that sacramental seal comes in. So broadly speaking, the history goes like this. Sacramental confession in the early church was originally public. You would confess your sins before the congregation, and you would have public penance, and there were various forms of public penance, and they were often quite severe. You might be barred from the sacraments for 3 years, for instance. And you would be forced to leave partway through the liturgy. You could go to the Liturgy of the Word, but then you were forced to leave for the Liturgy of the Eucharist. And so you would have, for things like apostasy and adultery and the like, not all sins were treated that harshly, but there was a real seriousness around the issue of sin at a time when we were building martyrs. And so we took the problem of even small sins quite seriously. But one of the unintended side effects of this is people were sometimes afraid of going to confession. They didn't want to announce to the whole congregation the sin that they'd fallen into. And so originally arising both in the East and in Ireland in the monasteries, you have the origins of private confession, where you would simply, like the monks would beat their breast to signal that they had something to confess, and then they would go and confess it individually with the abbot. There wasn't the expectation of total privacy, though. It could still be revealed. And that changes, I believe, in the 12th century with Gratian's decretals, that they create a duty that the priest may not betray the things revealed into him, either by word or by sign, what's been revealed in confession. So it sounds like the book you're reading is right around the time that this change is becoming the norm.
Okay, Rich?
Yep. And then in the modern world...
Joe, there's the second question. Could a priest withhold absolution in this case like this or something?
Oh, I'm sorry. I totally missed that part of the question. The priest can only withhold absolution if he thinks you're not penitent. And confession publicly can be a sign of penance, but is not by itself. Like the priest can't make your penance to be go and tell everyone the thing that you did. Because if you are contrite for your sin, that is what's needed for you to receive absolution. And he's not to withhold it in those cases. The other thing I should add, I'm sorry.
So that's what I assumed, but I was just kind of curious.
Good. Rich.
Yeah, I mean, if someone is particularly doing like a habitual sin, and they're not, like if it's a crime and they're not turning themselves in, or they're not telling their wife, or whatever else, those might be signs that they're not very contrite, and the priest should probably take that as a cue to take a deeper investigation as to whether they are in fact contrite for their sin, and he can give counsel encouraging them, but he can't force them to do that. It has to still be a free act of their will. The other thing I wanted to make sure I added, I gave a very brief sketch of the history of confession. The Fourth Lateran Council in 1215 talks about the sacramental seal as well. So it's not just like medieval canon law.
Laura, Billy, Michael, Mary, right back after this.
It's all about the truth. Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
He is only one of 4 popes honored as the Great.
Matthew Bunsen and the Doctors of the Church.
St. Leo I was pope at a time when Roman civilization was being overrun by barbarian armies. He stood as a light in the darkness and even saved the city of Rome from destruction by Attila and the Huns. Leo died in 461.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
The Catechism defines evangelization as the proclamation of Christ and his gospel by word and the testimony of life. But what does that look like in real life? It looks like St. Paul Street Evangelists out in the public square, sharing the good news. We're a Catholic nonprofit that starts conversations by handing out free sacramentals. Then we employ our method of listen, befriend, proclaim, and invite. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
Catholic Answers Live. Chris Check sitting in for Cy Kellett. My friends, we got less than 10 minutes and 4 questions to answer. Laura in North Carolina watching on the Catholic Answers YouTube app. How can we help?
Thank you, Chris. So, Joe, my dilemma at my parish church is that very often, and maybe even most of the time, when pre-rosary is happening before Mass or even the start of Mass, I hear chatter. I typically sit at the very back near the doors to the sanctuary. I hear chatter having nothing to do with the services going on and typically coming from one of the prominent service groups affiliated with the church. And so my question is sort of 2 parts. Am I just being Miss Fussy Pants to be troubled by this? And if yes, fine, I'll take that. I'll fully accept that answer from you. If not, can you recommend how, with whom, and when, and in what manner I could bring this up for a remedy?
Sure.
Yeah, there's 2 things we have to distinguish. One is chatter during Mass, and the other is chatter before Mass, but near the church. For the before Mass, just sit further away from the door. I mean, honestly, depending on how your church is set up, frequently there are things like offices or other space that might be in the narthex, and it's probably not going to be realistic to have people be completely quiet. And so there, unfortunately, you've got different people who are using the church in different ways. If there is regularly a problem. I mean, again, it depends a lot on the letter of the church. It might be that it's inappropriate to be having a conversation because you're in a sacred space, but usually the narthex is kind of dual use. It is kind of in between place between the outside world and entering into the church, and so you have a certain amount of conversation that's going to happen there. But during Mass, certainly, it's not appropriate to be having conversations that's audible within the church itself. And I think it's perfectly fine in those cases to talk first to maybe the priest, to just say, could you put up a sign or maybe make a general announcement so nobody individually is being called out, but people can be reminded that this is a sacred space and we want to respect the liturgy. But other than that, again, a certain amount of the noise is just going to happen either way. And you might just be better served either by having a one-on-one conversation or by putting yourself in a place where you are further from the noise.
Okay, Laura?
Yes, and so I'm hearing if I decide that it's worth bringing up, I'm hearing you saying fine to go straight to the priest.
Yeah, it is. You're not trying to pick on anybody in particular. You're trying to help a general rule for the parish itself. And so this is different than saying Mrs. Smith is a real problem. It's more just like there is generally a parish problem with noise that you perceive, and therefore the priest is qualified to answer that more than any individual is.
Yeah. God bless you, Laura.
Super. Thanks very much.
Take care. Call back
you bet.
anytime. Billy in Texas, watching on the Catholic Answers YouTube channel. Welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Sure.
With the Catholic Church recognizing that ghosts are real, I was wondering, does the Catholic Church have any stance on if fairies are real? Or is it just something some storyteller
This is a great question.
Go ahead. John.
So the part of the question is figuring out what you mean by fairies. Like, what kind of beings are they? Are these very small material beings? Are they spiritual beings, etc.? And certainly you can find plenty of Christians historically who took the existence of beings like fairies for granted. The church doesn't have an explicit position on them. I think it's probably fair to say most people today, Catholic or not, don't believe in fairies. And we don't want, it does create certain theological problems if they're individual rational creatures that are not angels or demons or ghosts, that are something else. We don't have a real clear taxonomy for them, whether they're material or invisible, but it doesn't seem insurmountable. You could still have them be spiritual beings, like a different, you have angels and archangels and thrones and dominions and powers and principalities. Fairies aren't mentioned there, but it wouldn't be impossible. Origen has a reference.
Well, if they are neutral spirits, are they capable of being saintly or repenting in a way?
This is a great question. So Origen talks about individual husbandmen and guardians that help in the natural world, and he says we deny that these invisible agents are demons. And so he thinks that there are these invisible spiritual beings, but they're not demonic. But this question of are they benevolent or malevolent comes up, because those are really the two categories. The idea of them being just like a third neutral thing is harder to square with the Christian worldview. I would say not impossible. I know a Catholic family that really wants to affirm the existence of fairies. I'm actually going over there after this show, so they'll be happy to hear that you asked this. But I'm dubious of fairies, partly because I don't see a way of neatly fitting them into a Catholic worldview if they are not angels or fallen angels, but are something else instead.
Billy, I'm going to try to get one more question in. Call back anytime. Mary in Seattle, Washington, watching on the Catholic Answers YouTube channel. Welcome to Catholic Answers Live. Mary, please be quick and we'll answer your question.
Hi. So my question is about dying in a state of mortal sin. So, and by the way, thank you for the show. I love the show. So,
Lori.
Basically, the idea is that, like, if someone you know dies in the state of mortal sin, the church teaches that they will, someone dying in a state of mortal sin they'll go to hell. But then the church also teaches that we shouldn't despair over anyone's salvation, and that we don't really know if anyone's in hell, and we can't confirm if anyone's in hell. And so my question is kind of like, it seems kind of contradictory.
We got it, Mary. We've got it. We've got it. Yep.
So paragraph 2283 of the Catechism talks about this in the context of those who commit suicide. Suicide is a grave evil, but the people who do grave evil are sometimes not in a place where they are mentally with it enough to be morally responsible for the evil that they do. And so the Catechism says we shouldn't despair of the eternal salvation of persons who've taken their own lives by ways known to him alone. God can provide the opportunity for salutary repentance. The church prays for persons who've taken their own lives. And I would extend that to all sins. You may know the thing that they did was evil. You don't know their heart to know if they did it freely and knowledgeably. God alone knows that. And so we pray for them even if they've done something gravely wrong.
Michael in Alton, Illinois, send an email to radio@catholic.com and we'll send you some things to read about Enoch and Elijah. Joe, great job. Always a joy to be with you. Chris Check sitting in for Cy Kellett. Thomas Graff tomorrow. God bless you all. 22 hours? What is it? 22 hours. We'll see you then.
Yeah, 22 more hours.